again. Now division becomes mandatory and old material number, lab or office is not there. Product allocation is visible because this material is not for mechanical engineering. How to confirm? Go to MM01, enter the same material number. And you'll see the industry sector is food and related. So since it is not mechanical engineering, the product allocation field is now visible. So like this, based on the requirement, the client requirement, we can manage the different field selections which are required in different views and subscreens. So once you're done with your practice, if you're working on a practice server, please change the settings back to the standard by going back and forth between what your selection was and how it should be effective. Once I've undone the changes, now when I go back to the material and select basic data 1 and check the information, I should see all the fields back to the standard display, right? So similarly, the material that we created also, and we check the grouping, the fields will be back to normal. So in this way, based on the client requirement, I can manage all the field selections required. Now, one interesting thing is in grouping code 90, we have a lot of fields which will be affected the same way. Now, what if the client says they want to have the field selection affected only for one of those fields? Then what to do? So in that scenario, go to double click on any of the field references and you'll see the list of all these grouping codes and how to manage them for that particular field reference code. Okay. So against each grouping code, click on this icon and it will display the fields in that group. Keep clicking on this icon to see if you can find any groups which will not have any fields. And yes, there are certain grouping codes which will not have any fields in them. You only need to search for them. So here, grouping code 8 does not have any fields. So what I can do is, since the client wants to affect only the division field out of the and not affect the other fields, I'm going to move this particular field to grouping code 8, which is a blank tape, a blank grouping code. How to do that? Check the table name and field name for that field. Go back to assign fields to field selection groups and scroll down till you come to that particular table name and field name, which is MARASPART, and simply enter the new grouping code for that particular field. Save it. Now what will happen? Grouping code 8 will have only one field, and that field can be maintained as per the client requirement now, and it's not going to affect any other field left out in the previous grouping code, right? So this way I can manage to separate a specific field and maintain separate field status for that field also, provided I know how to do that. Now that you know how to do it, later on when you get that option, you can also do the field selection for a specific field. Okay. Now when I maintain the field selection here, the field references are already created because this is a practice system. The field references are already created. In real time, field references will not be predefined. You have to create all the field references required. How to create a new field reference? Just click on new entries here, enter a new 1 to 4 character field reference code starting with Y or Z and maintain your field selection. So I'm going to just enter a random code and maintain certain field selections. Some of the fields that we specified as not required, I'm going to change them to hide so that wherever I can assign this field reference. Now once I create the field reference, where can I use it? I can assign this field reference code to a new industry sector or a material type or a username or even to a plant. So for one of these four options, I can create and assign a new field reference code. For material types, for transaction codes, you cannot create a random code. You have to use the same code as the field reference code as that of the transaction code. Okay, so that's the reason a new field reference code for the transaction code has to be the same as the transaction code. All right. So since I've created and maintained certain field settings in that grouping code, in that field reference code, let's see how to, sorry for that background noise. So as I was saying, since we have created a new field reference code, I can assign it to a new industry sector. So let's see how to create a new industry sector and assign this field reference code to that. Okay. So for that, again, go back to the IMG screen, go to the next transaction, which is define industry sector and industry sector specific field selection. Industry sector is identified by a one character alphanumeric code. So let's use the code 4 for, let's take boiler industry. So click on new entries, enter the code, description, and enter the field reference code. It's as simple as that. There's nothing else that you need to create. Click on save. Now after creating a new industry sector and assigning the field reference, I can also go back to the screen sequence assignment and change the screen sequence assignment from the standard industry sector mechanical to the industry sector that I've created. So go back to industry sector screen reference and change the screen reference code for the standard mechanical engineering back to M, which is standard, and assign the code that we assigned to the previous industry sector to the new one that we have created. So now the screen sequence that we have assigned for this combination will now be applicable to the new industry sector. So let's see how it affects. So create a material of that material type, go to MM01, select the industry sector that we just created, select the standard material type, which is ROH, enter one of the material numbers. So now the view selection will be as per the screen sequence that we have created and in the same order that we have maintained. So yeah, it has changed. Enter the plant, storage location, and now you see the field selection is also restricted. There are very few fields and the subscreens are also as per the screen sequence that we have maintained. Since we have maintained it only for basic data 1, the other screens you will not see any difference. But As you can understand, the field selection that we did for the basic data view can also be carried out for any other view in the same way. We just need to create the list of fields that we need to manipulate and specify how they should be manipulated. Then you get the database table and field name information. Then you check for the grouping code. Then based on the grouping code, you maintain the field selection to maintain the fields in one of these four states. Pretty easy, huh? Mhm. Now the next configuration is a pretty interesting one. We're talking about plant-specific field selection and screen selection. Now, why do we need to maintain field selection or screen sequence at plant level or field screen selection plant level? Probably because based on the plans, there are certain activities which may not be carried out based on the business activities. In certain plans, you may only have production related activities. In some plans, you may have only sales related. In some other plans, you only have service related. So based on the type of activities carried out in each plant, your client may want to have only those types of views, and in each of those views, only specific types of fields to be visible. If that is the scenario, then you go to this define plant specific field selection and plant specific screen selection and maintain the combination of maintenance status codes. So these are all the maintenance status codes that are available for use. Let's say one of the plants, the two plants that we created, this plant is only for sales. So I should not have any data relating to purchasing and production. Okay. And so work scheduling is not required, classification is not required, MRP is not required, purchasing is not required, production resources, costing, forecasting, quality management. These are not required for this plant. So let's go ahead and delete those maintenance status codes. So I don't want A, C, D, E, F, A, even G is not required, costing, then forecasting and quality management. G, P, and Q are not required. So G, P, and Q. I'm just going to delete those maintenance status codes and enter the field reference code that I have created earlier, even though you can create a new field reference code for this plant to maintain the fields as required. Save the entry. Now, let's say I extend the material that we just created to the second plant. So in the first plant, we did maintain the purchasing views. Okay. So I select it. I select the purchasing view also. And I enter the second plant, storage location. Until the plant is specified, system will not show any difference, right? But when you maintain the data for that plant, if you remember when we extended the material layer, the system showed us the purchasing view first. But now we are seeing the plant data storage. And if I try to select purchasing view here, it will show me that purchasing is not selectable here because this plant purchasing is not there. Okay.